Okay. So from the competencies, we're going to go into core values. The core values of social work include service. So our service to our clients, our community, to the governmental system. Service isn't just necessarily to individuals, groups, and families, but the greater community and the greater what we call macro system. Social justice is very much a big core value of social work. Being able to honor the dignity and worth of the person. We want to make sure that students are following the importance of human relationships, and so developing those human relationships with honesty, transparency, and health. Good integrity, and then competence. We want to make sure, number 6 of the core values is something that we can say at the end of that 2-semester experience, that they're competent at that training level. And again, the code of ethics kind of guides our core values. It does guide our core values and our professional standards. Okay, so just a couple of logistical things. In terms of I sometimes get the question, even after someone may take on a student, what really is the difference between a generalist or foundation student versus a clinical student? What we do in the MSW program is we've got students coming into our program who have no social work experience whatsoever. So they come in and they're doing a full MSW program. They're going to be starting out as what's called a generalist training student or foundation level student. They are only going to learn how to do introductory social work skills, including case management, a little bit of psychoeducation as an example. They would know how to do things like a basic needs assessment, and they would have some basic knowledge of building rapport and engagement skills. They are not ready to do any kind of clinical level interventions. And what that simply can be put as is any type of therapeutic piece. So no diagnostic assessments of mental health disorders. They are not prepared to do therapy. They can certainly be co-facilitating a group with you, but they don't have the training knowledge to be able to lead a group, and certainly not a psychotherapeutic group. So they could definitely try to run a social skills group. They could try to co-facilitate a basic needs group, for example. If a group of individuals, parents get together and you want to run a group for parenting skills, those kind of things. So there's a set curriculum, and it's a pretty basic curriculum that a student in a first year might run. So sometimes I get that question still, where we might get to a midterm or even a final, and there's a question about whether the student actually did a clinical performance. And so we'd like to just clarify that, because sometimes in the world of mental health and in the world of postmaster's training, as well as education of master's level mental health professionals, and similar professions, clinical is used a little bit differently. So we want to make sure you understand that kind of difference. So if you have a generalist or foundation level student starting with you, that is what they'll be able to do. It's really grounded in liberal arts education, focused on the person and environment. So really, are they able to assess the individual within that greater environment, within their family, within their community, and how those things interact with that client that they're interacting with. It's going to apply principles and critical thinking, professional behavior, again, reviewing code of ethics. It's going to be micro, meso, and macro. And micro meaning more individual or small groups, meso meaning more community level, and macro meaning more state and governmental levels, or macro level could also be a large scale policy that's affecting an individual. Support and building on strengths and resiliency. So they're going to be looking at how the strengths of an individual can help them, how resiliency might help them as human beings. So really, you kind of think about the core things that you might have learned in your education, those kind of basics of how to look at people, how to approach people, how do we treat people with integrity. How do we move in the way of social justice? Those are what we consider introductory or ground level social work principles. If you have that student, you are going to be with them for 400 minimum total hours, about 13 to 15 hours a week for the fall and spring semesters. I did add kind of a note too, is sometimes I've heard students maybe participating in physical restraints or administering medications. As examples, these would not be something that's considered social work scope of practice. Now, does it mean that someone with a similar education might be doing those things? Yes, absolutely. But we'd really rather our students are not engaging in those types of activities as a student. If you have questions about any of this, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay. All right, and so for the clinical year, which is going to be the last placement before students graduate. So this is for those students without the undergraduate degree in social work, this is their second placement. If you have a clinical student, they're going to be doing a minimum of 600 hours with you for the fall and spring, for a total of 18 to 23 hours per week. This is their specialty year, a concentration year, and it's going to build off their foundation practice, augmenting and extending social work knowledge, values, and skills to really move beyond the basic engagement, assessment, and intervention to more of the therapy level if they're in the mental health setting, or the ability to assess and engage with potential for more mental health issues. So even if a clinical student is in a medical setting, for example, and perhaps you're not necessarily doing therapy, that individual student might be engaging, assessing, intervening, and evaluating for any concerns of mental health issues. They'll be able to now do that at a more advanced level to practice that. Advocate with and on behalf of clients based on scientific inquiry and best practices consistent with social work values. So they're going to build off their first year of training, and hopefully in the clinical year, you're going to start seeing more of the professional behavior and moving beyond basic engagement skills with clients to a more advanced level of therapy or advanced level of assessment at different ways as a more clinical level social worker. Again, hoping that the student would participate in things that would exclude physical restraints or administering medications or anything that might be outside of sort of the scope of a clinical social work practice experience. But again, they are now ready to do diagnostic assessments, which for you that might not be familiar, that's a common term in Minnesota, but that's really that's any of the DSM diagnosis would be another way to say that. So they're ready to do a DSM diagnosis. They're ready to practice individual, group, families, couples therapy, and they're able to do more advanced research. They'll do a capstone, similar to a thesis, but not quite to the extent at the end of their clinical placement or in the second semester. So if you have a clinical student, you'll be talking with your student about a capstone project, research project that involves your agency as well. Okay, so I just want to kind of real briefly go through the roles. Again, if you're new to the role or you're new to having a task supervisor with you, this oftentimes is important to just kind of revisit some of the roles and responsibilities. I do find that when an individual steps into a new role, even if maybe they've had a similar role with a different university, it's a little bit different with St. Mary's. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but I want to go through these roles and responsibilities and then to kind of give you a framework as to kind of expectations or hopes, I should say, that we would hope for the student and for you all as we see you as an extension of our education for our students. At a minimum, MSW field supervisors must have graduated from a council and social work education accredited program and have at least 2 years of postmaster's experience in social work practice. We always look for at least 5 years, but we know that a lot of folks in social work are retiring and there's less, and there is a shortage of social work. So definitely CSWE does approve someone with at least 2 years postmasters. MSW's field supervisors work with the student and the agency to ensure the students gain knowledge, values, and skills, and the professional cognitive and affective, so thinking and emotion, process associated with the social work profession. So whether you're working with a task supervisor or not, your goals are very clear in terms of modeling, mentoring, and supervising, as well as helping to integrate social work theory and practice with the student. We also expect that the student would meet formally with the MSW supervisor one-to-one in direct supervision, 1 hour per week. For some of you, I have talked to you about maybe some slight alternatives to that. That could be that perhaps it's 2 hours per month that you're meeting one-to-one with the student, and then 2 hours a month you do group supervision. And that is acceptable. If you are unsure whether or not at this point or would be concerned about being able to meet that criteria, that would also be something I would like to be able to engage an email with you about, and coming up with a plan to make sure that the student has the supervision that's required to make sure that they have the framework for their placement and your guidance and feedback on a fairly regular basis. You also have the primary responsibility for the student's learning in the field placement, reinforce the student's identification with the social work values and ethics of the profession, foster the integration of practice-based and empirical, so researched in terms of research, in terms of policy and practice, as well as the knowledge of how to practice, and promoting the development of professional skills and competencies. I'm going to go through the task supervisor, and then I'm going to stop to see if there's any questions. I don't know that there has been any questions, but if you do have questions along the way as well, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. I hate to just be lecturing at you for the whole 2 hours. I do have a lot to cover, but at the same time, there may be questions in the chat that you can help and also give you an opportunity to engage with each other as I discuss. And again, I will stop for questions in the chat periodically. For the task supervisor, at a minimum, task supervisors must have graduated from an accredited program in their practice world and have at least 2 years of postmaster's degree practice experience in a field similar to social work. I have, and some of you are, bachelor level task supervisors that have been accepted on a case-by-case basis based on your experience and your training. The task supervisor orients the student to the agency, its affiliates, provides on-site training, and monitors, directs, and supervises the student's daily practice. So we don't expect that you would have the knowledge or the know-how to be able to train a student in social work practice or to role model that. So therefore, your role is really to orient the student to the agency. If you have affiliates that you work closely with, orient them to those affiliates, how to work with those affiliates, providing on-site training. So if there are certain tasks that are done that the student will do throughout through the semester, it would be your primary responsibility to make sure that they are trained efficiently, and you're monitoring and directing the work that they're doing, as well as supervising what they're doing and assessing that they're doing a competent job, that they're getting to a level of competency appropriate for their training level. So if they're introductory students, are they meeting introductory competencies? And obviously your assistance comes from the MSW supervisor that will help be able to assist you in that assessment of their skills. So together, and again, this is a little bit different. We really do try to formalize the task supervisor and the MSW supervisor. And this can shift throughout the semester, but we definitely want you part of the formal process. And that is why we ask that both the MSW supervisor and task supervisor turned in paperwork to us for my review and approval. It also allows you the opportunity then to be a approved supervisor in the software program, so you can engage with all the documents the student is completing with you. I absolutely believe that the task supervisor and MSW supervisor have equitable and equally important parts to the student's education. Excuse me. So therefore, we definitely want you to be able to have shared roles and responsibilities and know what they are so that you can engage in the best opportunity for the student and for yourselves to get the best from the student as well. So together you're going to be teaching and evaluating the students. You're going to conceptualize, communicate, and provide role modeling of professional knowledge and skill, develop an individualized education contract, which we call the learning plan, with specific learning objectives. You'll be identifying individual learning styles and needs of the students, as well as being sensitive to the emotional aspects of their socialization or their movement into the professional. We're going to communicate. I definitely would like you to be able to communicate at least 4 times per month to discuss the progress of the student. So this can be in the form of a short email, a quick phone call, office drop-in. So it really doesn't have to be anything formal. I don't want to put a lot of extra work on you, but I do want to kind of ensure that when we get to a midterm formal evaluation, when you're all there, you'd all be able to speak and be able to be abreast at the midterm or final of how that student is doing overall, that you have a pretty good sense, both as the task supervisor and the MSW supervisor, how the student is progressing through the semester. I do very much request that all changes to the supervisors would be approved in advance. Again, this is just to formalize and for you to understand. So if you anticipate transitioning out at some point, or you are leaving the agency, or you add a supervisor, that individual is then, that name and that email is provided to us, and the student will send that. You all completed that affidavit regarding your background and attestation to the role of supervisor, that we would send that information to the new supervisors. Then they would be able to as well be able to interact with the documents of the student. And the liaisons, who I'll talk about in a minute, will have the ability to know who you are and be able to engage you successfully. So the field liaison, I'm getting a little warm, so I'm going to just take off my jacket. The field liaison is the individual who works in collaboration with you at the agency, the students, and they are also the voice of the university. So at least for them as well, they must have graduated from a CSWE accredited program and have at least 2 years of postmaster's social work experience. The field liaisons serve as the primary link between the student field placement and the social work department. So their role is to support you and the student and guide you through the field experience. I really can't reiterate enough. I really don't want you to ever feel that you are floundering with the student. Our field liaisons are very proactive in getting back to you, at reaching out, I should say, and proactive in reaching out to you, but and very quick in response. They are required to get back to you within less than 2 days. If it's emergency, they'll be able to give you more contact information. I believe about a week ago, I think it was, they had sent out your liaison information. So if you do not have it, please reach out to us to make sure that you get it, but you would have had it in your email last week introducing you to your field liaison, and they will also be reaching out to you within the next couple of weeks to introduce themselves a little more as well. Okay, I'm going to just take a stop there, see if there's anything in the chat. All right. It looks like the first part is names, and there might be a couple questions. Okay, could they review the notes to help begin an assessment update with supervisor support? I'm not sure if I know who they is. If it's students or supervisors, yes, you'll all be engaging in the same documents. The documents are housed in Tavera, so you will have access to the documents as soon as they are have access to the course. So we'll be setting up the actual course for students and supervisors to engage with in about 2 weeks or less. Probably it'll actually be next week. Time's getting quick on me. So it'll be next week, and you'll be able to start engaging with those forms. There's a timesheet, a learning plan, and a midterm and final evaluation that you'll be engaging with regularly throughout the 2 semesters. And we'll actually do you a little bit of a walkthrough on Tavera, the field software program, in just a few minutes. If that doesn't answer your question, please follow up, whoever, I think that was from Shannon. All right, question. Can group supervision include interns at our organization who are related academic programs? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so a student could use their group supervision as long as they're still getting 2 hours of individual time with that MSW supervisor to really focus on their individual learning plan and specifically social work practice and the way they're integrating it. The email from the liaison, if you haven't gotten it yet, you should be getting it next week. I'll send a reminder to all the liaisons to make sure that they reach out to you. I did give them about 2 weeks from the time I sent your email out to get in touch with you. So they may, I'll remind them to reach out to you next week as well. Do both clinical and task supervisors both do an evaluation on the student? So we don't actually use the word clinical supervisor. And so these are some of the terms that I'm glad you brought that up. So, so a clinical supervisor for the clinical student, I'm going to assume that's what you're called the MSW supervisor. So the MSW supervisor and the task supervisor. So we refrain from using clinical supervisor just because we have clinical students and we have non-clinical students. So yes, but the question of do they both do an evaluation? Absolutely. So as I was explaining, the task supervisor and the MSW supervisor are equally providing input into the learning plan development, as well as the assessment of the student for the midterm and the final. And that absolutely will be. You're absolutely, as a task supervisor for a clinical level student, will absolutely be assessing their clinical skills and participating in the assessment. Yes, thanks to yes, good question. So absolutely, can one person be both? Yes, if a person is an MSW supervisor, if they have that master's degree in social work with at least 2 years post-grad, and they are a clinical licensed individual in their state for a clinical student, you absolutely can be both. Because of the national social work shortage, we often use task supervisors. So that is why I spend the time kind of talking about each one, but absolutely you may be assigned a student and may be the MSW supervisor and you're the only supervisor for that student. If you think, the only thing I will add to that is if you think that you might have individuals who the student is going to be working with consistently, like 1 or 2 individuals who are going to spend more of their time with that individual as a task supervisor, then I would encourage you to formalize that person. And that would mean the student would have that supervisor as well complete documentation. So that's why I spend that time talking about it too, because I do find that that sometimes after this orientation, or even as we get into the field semester, we get to midterm and there's a new individual at the midterm meeting who we've not met before and we didn't know about. And then they're providing feedback and we find that the student's been working with them. Unfortunately, sometimes those individuals are not qualified. They don't have the correct training or experience to work with the student. So we've had to kind of change things up kind of at midterm, which can be difficult. Or, certainly the person might be qualified, but we haven't maybe provided good communication to them or invited them formally, or had them looking at student documents because they wouldn't have access to Tavera if they're not formalized. So just a kind of point of clarification as well. Okay, I think I made it through the chat. All right, and I think I pretty much discovered, the liaison is really your go-to person if you have any concerns or questions about the field student and the field placement in relationship to how to really give the best experience to the student. You can reach out to the field liaison. I'm also very available, but I have a very heavy plate as well. And liaison often knows more about your student than I do because they're also going to be the instructor for most students. They're going to teach the student field seminar class. The student participates in a live field seminar every other week for 1 hour via Zoom. So they read students' process recordings, they will read the students' field logs, they're going to review those timesheets, they're going to sign off on those learning plans. So they really know your student the best. They're really engaged. So if you have a question, your liaison with the person to be going. Occasionally, rarely, the field liaison is not the instructor, but they would be able to let you know. And those in your field liaison and then seminar instructor do speak frequently, if they are two different people, of course. Hopefully they're not talking together. Maybe they are. Okay. And my role as the field education director is to provide leadership, implement policy, coordinate field placements. Between myself and my field support team, Bonnie, who we didn't get to do as many introductions in the beginning, but who's kind of helped you get over to this other space, as well as Liz. They are the two contact people for the field office. They're my support staff that help on the administrative sides of things. So we do a lot of the front end work. Obviously, I stay very connected with students if there's a crisis, if there's an incident that needs to be discussed, if there's a larger conflict or concern, I'm definitely going to be involved in those at my level as well. All right, so I want to talk about field supervision. Student supervision obviously can be different, look different than if you have a post-grad student or if you're doing licensing. The functions of what we hope, this is a model, this is not an expectation, but it's a model that we have found in best practice of student supervision in social work. And that's kind of threefold in terms of function. The first being more administrative, trainer, evaluator. You have the overall management of the student. You want to, in the first couple of weeks, they're definitely going to be doing agency orientation. You will be providing training to them if you're, whether you're the MSW supervisor and you are the field supervisor for all things, or if you're a task supervisor, you'll be training the student day to day. Providing them task assignments, schedules, helping them with documentation completion, any kind of formal and informal evaluation. So again, this is for both the task supervisor and the MSW supervisor, depending. Obviously, if you're off-site, your role as the MSW supervisor 1 hour per week is really going to be more about that integration and mentorship and role modeling of good professional social work behavior, as well as that assistance and integration in theory and practice. Education and teacher. So I like this model because absolutely the student that's joining you is in that role of student. And so we very much would expect that there would be, you would want to feel like the teacher, that you would hope to feel like that teacher, and that you have those moments to feel like the teacher, assisting in the learning process, focusing on education, the integration of the curriculum, and that, that doesn't have to be hard curriculum that we're talking about in the MSW program, for example, but it's really more about mentoring and education of the practice. If you're in the field of serving others, then absolutely, teaching them how to do that in the best possible way. Supportive, coach, collaborator, I'm getting tongue-tied. So absolutely, sometimes you have to switch gears and put on your coach collaborator hat with our students. And so, and students know these roles, but sometimes they're going to get shy about, they may be very shy in their role or approach to the agency and working with individuals. Some of our students are, pretty advanced and maybe have been working in a similar field for many years, or are coming back as a second career. So, supervision certainly can look a little bit differently based on your student. And just like we meet our clients where they're at, we want to just make sure that you're able to meet our students where they're at, and we are there to help you with that process if you have any questions about that. See a couple of questions coming in. The students are not submitting their process recording to us as their supervisors at the agency they are doing their internship at, as well as their field liaison. So students complete process recordings and they discuss their process recordings with you. So they won't be turning them into you per se, they do turn them into a seminar class for the seminar instructor to review and give feedback on, but they absolutely have to integrate into their process recording what they've done in terms of supervision with you in discussing what occurred in those process recordings, and obviously get your permission before. There is no, at any point our process recordings are not recorded, either audio or visual. They're just a review of the student's process working with a client. Do you have a mandate that the one-to-one supervision with the field supervisor has to be face-to-face, or can be? It absolutely can be televideo. Yep. In fact, many of our students are assigned someone who's an individual, an MSW supervisor from another state. The task supervisor definitely is not. They are definitely with the student all the time, or majority of the time. MSW supervisor certainly could be offsite and certainly could be working as a consultant. We, as an example, have adjuncts that on a case-by-case basis act as the MSW supervisor, so they're only meeting with that student via Zoom or some type of other televideo system. Okay, good questions. I like the interaction. All right. Okay, so obviously when we talk about signature pedagogy, that's the fancy way of saying experiential learning. When we talk about signature pedagogy of field. So field is experiential learning. And we don't expect you to be experts in it. So that's why I just give you some introductory ideas. You can kind of build in. Obviously, some of you have been supervisors longer than I've been in practice. So absolutely, I don't want to say that it has to be done this way, but just kind of reminds. I think it's a nice reminder and hopefully refresher tonight, if you have been doing supervision a while, that it is experiential learning. Students who come in, whether it's their first year as a first-year foundation student or as a clinical student, we definitely expect that they're going to be an observation, reflective observation first. They're going to be reviewing and reflecting on their experience with you. Then moving from, they'll be observing and reflecting with you to abstract conceptualization and concluding and learning from their experience from the observation, what they reflected upon. And then actively experimenting, planning and trying out what they've learned, what they hope to learn, giving them concrete experience. And then doing and having that experience and then reflecting on that again. So I see experiential learning from the Kolb's perspective, or Kolb's cycle of experiential learning. It's a cyclical process that includes very much an active integration, or I should say interaction, between the supervisors and the student. Definitely in the beginning, depending on how strongly you think your student skills are, I would anticipate or expect that within the first 4 to 6 weeks, that student will, at least the first 4 to 6 weeks, that student will be in mostly observation and co-facilitation if you feel they're ready to do so. If you think that they're ready to do it a little bit sooner, absolutely, that's your decision. If you're concerned they're not quite ready, at midterm, that would be the time to discuss this. So midterm would be in around, happens between weeks 6 and 8 of the first semester. And so if you're concerned that your student might not be ready to move from observation only, at that point, at whatever training level, whether it's first year student or clinical student, definitely at the earliest, or I should say that would be the latest, that we'd want to have that discussion at midterm and see what might be the hesitation to start moving that student to phase 2, which would be more of leading, and then potentially by typically by second semester, the student would have a little more lead and potentially have a few cases of their own. And again, the timing of this could vary slightly based on your individual student, but that certainly can be questions that you, if you're unsure about, to connect with your field liaison about as well. So the MSW learning plan, I've mentioned it a few times. I would absolutely say that this is the most important document of the entire experience for students in terms of learning. Obviously, they're going to have documents you want them to complete and assessments you want them to do. But for us, from an educational perspective, this is the most important document that we have. The Council on Social Work Education mandates that every student has one of these, and that incorporates those 9 competencies that we talked about in the beginning. I gave you some examples, and for those of you that joined kind of late, I did go through the 9 competencies. Again, this will be provided to you in PowerPoint form after our meeting this evening, as well as the recording will be provided. And so those 9 competencies are built into the learning plan. We ask that under each competency, there's 2 tasks for the student to complete that are associated with that competency that you'll create with the student at the beginning of each semester. So in other words, you'll actually be completing 2 learning plans, one at the beginning of semester 1 and one at the beginning of semester 2. We ask that, like a lot of treatment plans or assessments, post-assessment processes that you might follow, that the tasks themselves are written in such a way that they're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, relevant, and time-bound. They're smart goals. So, and that they're action verbs is another way to kind of think about this. Students should be performing something that you can assess, that you can look at them, you can evaluate that task that they're doing and be able to provide a tentative score. We actually do a rating score of 1 to 5 on each task based on, 1 being that they've not performed that task at all, and a 5 being that they're doing an exceptional job with that task. Again, you are not the only one participating in the assessment process, and the field liaison is actually providing the final grade. So they are taking your input in the scoring, because obviously you are the one who best knows what the student has been doing over the last 16 weeks, or at midterm by 6 to 8 weeks. So we want your input, and we want that learning plan to be able to help guide you. I think it's a way to create a structure for you as you move forward. A way to think about this too, if you're in the treatment world, you're in the service world, there's almost always a paper trail where you have to put down what you're going to do with a client. Right, so you have to put it in, it's got to be specific when you anticipate that goal will be met or when a progress review will be done. This is the exact same for a student, and it's no less important. It keeps you on target, it keeps you aligned, it keeps you reminded of what is at the framework or at the front, framework and front of every student day. So the learning plan can be part of the supervision time for those that are doing the 1 hour per week. It can be utilized to make sure that at midterm that those tasks are being done. Sometimes we get real busy on one area or one competency, not realizing it because we haven't looked at the learning plan for a while. So I can't reiterate enough the importance of the learning plan creation, taking the time to create it well in the first 2 weeks, and then being able to speak to it at midterm and final. Okay. Any questions? I'd be happy to take any questions about the learning plan. Like I said, I do feel it's so important. Supervision is probably one of the most important processes in integration of the student knowledge. And the plan is what guides all of that. So I just want to make sure if there's any questions that you don't hesitate to chime in the chat. I will move on to field evaluation, but I'd be happy to come back to questions in a minute because I don't see any new questions coming up at the moment. So the midterm field evaluation, I've mentioned a couple of times that there are 2 formal times through the semester, each semester, that you will have time to sit down with the student, if you have another supervisor to do that as well, and the field liaison. It is a collaborative meeting where you discuss the student's progress toward attaining those learning objectives from the learning plan. So these formal evaluations are completed during a live collaborative meeting. So there will be typically it's run by Zoom. We'll send you a Zoom invite for weeks 6 through 8 of semester 1, and then week 14 through 16 of the final And that again is the same for semester 2. So the same model as for the semester 2. The midterm evaluation is a progress report more than a grade. So at this point, we're just looking to see how the student's doing. It's a kind of a benchmark. How is that student doing? What do they still need to be working on? What areas are we concerned about them not being able to meet for the final? Obviously, also from a strengths perspective, what are they doing well? And what can we build off of in terms of what they're doing well? It is, again, it's a benchmark, so it is scored just to give a numeric conceptualization or a concrete number to how the student's doing. An 18 or less, it doesn't mean much to you less, but there is a number associated to what we consider not passing for the midterm, but it is not, it's not meant to go in the grade book. It is just a benchmark in terms of where do we go from here to ensure that the student meets the minimum competency requirements for the end of the semester. And then at the final field evaluation, you're going to see a very similar document rated again on each. So each learning plan task is going to have a rating next to it, and you'll be able to then, and it's the same task through the whole semester. The students would need to obtain at least a 3 on each of the tasks in order to pass. And this technically is a pass-fail. So there is a grade associated with this course. Sometimes field is considered only pass-fail in some programs. We do actually provide a grade to the student. If they receive less than the minimum score for field, which out of 45 points is a 31.5, which is pretty generous. And so, most students, our students do better, much better than that, but we do have some students who are either on that line, and we do occasionally have a student who may not pass. And so they do have to repeat the semester. If they do so, that obviously does not mean that you're obligated in any way to maintain that student. That is for us to find another placement if they aren't able to stay on with you. And again, this is only if they would fail. Field supervisors will be asked to provide specific examples of when students were observed interacting with clients or performing other tasks. So making sure that along the way too, that you're taking notes and kind of just, even if it's just a mental note, gosh, they did a really nice job with this particular client, and I can speak to that at the midterm and or final. All right. One of the things I like to talk about too is gatekeeping to the profession. We're very much, and my philosophy to what gatekeeping is. So gatekeeping really, it's the idea of whether or not we're having our students ready for the next phase. We rely on all educators, including yourself, to provide us the feedback, whether or not you feel that a student is ready to move to the next level of training or even potentially graduation. And we take your input extremely seriously. Gatekeeping is defined as the professional obligation of social work educators to ensure that graduates are fit to practice social work by screening out unqualified students who may cause harm to clients. It is not necessarily your responsibility to be, and you're only providing input. We don't want you to feel too that if you say something at a midterm or a final that a student is not doing well in a certain area, that is part of the educational process. What we're talking about is someone who might exhibit emotional or mental instability that poses a risk of harm to the student or potential clients whose values are unclear and direct conflict with those of the social work profession. So, these are students who we very much would be concerned about demonstrating or being able to introduce themselves as a student social worker or as a social work professional. If you do, if you have even just basic concerns though, please don't hesitate to reach out to your field liaison or to connect with your co-supervisor if there is one assigned. Field supervisors, we really want you to have an obligation to the profession to assist with that gatekeeping process. And I don't want to add weight to you, but it's really, sometimes it's just as simple as being able to say, my gatekeeping is to say, I'm concerned that the student had too much self-disclosure with a client. And I'm seeing it consistently, and I've talked to the student about it, and I'm just not seeing an improvement. So that definitely, please bring that to the field liaison. So again, gatekeeping doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be terminating terminating. We're not in the business of terminating people who potentially could be great social workers, but it could be more education for that student. It might mean repeating some additional curriculum. It might be looking at an individual education plan for the student to help enhance those skills. Interruption of field placement. With all of the discussion of the new Delta variant of COVID-19, as much as I find myself with the self-awareness that I have been trying to push that news away, I have to be fully present of it as the field director. We managed to continue our field program actively through the entire height of the pandemic. And I have no doubt to believe that we'll continue to do so if we are looking at a concern of a heightened Delta variant being a part of more shutdowns in the future. We hope not. So I think we all hope that we all do our part to support our clients and each other through this difficult time. But we do have a policy and procedure in place for any types of interruption and placement. And that can include something as simple as a student's medical, needing to take a short medical leave. It could be due to a national or local event or communicable disease, natural disaster, or civil unrest. In efforts to fulfill the intern's hours requirements and educational competencies during temporary shutdowns or limitations of field to face-to-face contacts, we will absolutely help support you in assisting that student. And if for any reason you would need to shut down, or if you're continuing to be shut down, if you have been, we probably have already talked about it. Telehealth was very much a part of our COVID process and will continue to be. And I believe it in a positive way. It's not going to go anywhere for some individuals and families. That has maybe been one of the best things they've been able to experience, is having the ability to use telehealth. And not to say that, you may have your arguments for and against, because there absolutely is. But we definitely can assist you through interruption of field placement of any sort. We have no intent of ever stopping our field placement opportunities. Safety and COVID. So all students are required to complete a safety plan within the 4 weeks of the placement. So they do a learning plan in the first 2, but that's really much more formal. When I talk about a safety plan, it's really meant to make sure that the orientation of the student, they are aware of the policy and procedures to stay safe mentally, emotionally, and physically in their field placement. You absolutely, and I encourage you to consider doing a more concrete safety plan. Sometimes in busy agencies, we don't always think about that during the orientation process, but we do teach our students to seek a safety plan during those first 4 weeks. So they definitely might be talking to you about, what are the support services or resources available for their mental, emotional, and physical safety. As well as we ask that you provide them with information about how the COVID safety measures are that you have taken and what they are currently, to make sure that before they start their placement, they know to be aware of what their expectations might be regarding COVID-19 safety measures as well. If an incident ever occurs, which, when I learned back, 30 years ago when I started in my practice world, and in terms of my very early days in social work education as a student, was that an incident was anything that was outside of the norm. Now, that could be just about anything. For us, an incident report really would be anything outside of that student day that could be impacting their mental, emotional, or physical safety. We have an incident report in Tavera that we ask that the student you complete within 24 hours of an infraction of that safety plan occurring, or if an incident occurs that's outside of regular activity for that student for the day, that could be of concern. And the reason that is because the student has their own liability policy. If something were to happen, mental, emotional, or physical, during their field placement, we want to be able to have documentation in case the insurance company is requesting documentation of the incident, as well as just making sure that we are doing our best to stay abreast of any concerns and again, it could just be something very basic like walking through a hospital and there's a wet spot and the student slipped and fell. Some of the basic things that sometimes we interact with within the day that we would just like to have an incident report of to make sure that if something came down in terms of a request or a question or concern that we were kept aware of it. Okay, I'm going to stop again for questions in the chat. I don't think I see any. Again, please don't hesitate to put any in there or any comments. I do, very much if I'm looking for input, if there's things that you're unsure about, or if you're hoping to get more information about, even if we can't get to it tonight, I'd be happy to follow up with you as well. One chat coming in. Yes, so once you have formal access, which all of you on here should, to Tavera, the document is completed in collaboration. So yes, you absolutely will see the incident and you will sign off on it. So you'll be collaboratively completing it and signing off. All right, so, Tavera Field Software Program, with having students from, at any point, 50 different states, which we literally have individuals, I think tonight from, well, I can't remember exactly, but from the very far east to the very far west of the country, and some of the most southern states. And so we needed to adopt a software program that would help house all of our documents. And hopefully, there's definitely, and maybe you've already interacted with this or you've used Tavera in the past. I think Tavera, like a lot of field software programs, I don't think there's a perfect way. It's not a perfect system. And you probably experienced that a little bit already on the front end. But we really hope any snags that have been coming up, we really try to address. I'm very close with the Tavera team to make sure that they're making enhancements. So it's kind of what I might consider right now a necessary evil. I think a lot of people have a lot of good things to say about it as well. And I hope that you'll find, for the most part, it is a really nice way to just interact. The nice things about Tavera is that you're able to see what the student is doing. You're able to collaborate, even though similar to what that question of, can you meet with your student via Zoom? Well, it's probably because you're not nearby. So you can complete a learning plan collaboratively during a Zoom meeting and work on that document together and then sign off. So there's some really number of features. So obviously, when I adopted a program, I looked at a lot of different things. So there's a lot of nice things about it. Unfortunately, there are glitches and, like a lot of software programs, things can, get a little glitchy, but they do have a pretty good support team as well that you can access. So we're going to give you a little walkthrough at this point. I'm going to just show you a few things about what you're going to see once you enter into the class of the student and start interacting with those documents. I'm going to show you that learning plan framework. I'm going to show you a timesheet, things like that. So I'm going to just switch gears here for 1 second and pull that up. We go. All right. So I'm actually going to be showing you a student view, which is very similar to your view. And I'm going to pull that back up here. All right. I think all of you should be able to see it. Bonnie, can you see the screen?
I can.
Okay, thanks. So this is what the student sees, and yours is going to look almost exactly like this, except yours obviously is going to say welcome supervisor or something similar to that. So this is the home screen. So you're going to log in. The login should be provided, or you should be given a registration link. If you haven't, that would be something you want to follow up and look in your inbox or check your email from Tavera. So that would go to your email initially. You're going to be looking for a registration link. Sometimes people seem to miss that link, I've noticed. And then when they get to the learning plan and things, when the course starts, they realize they don't actually have access to the document because they thought when they did the documentation completion, when you did that piece of completing who you are and your background, and I approved that, that actually just lists you as a supervisor in the system, but it doesn't register your particular account. So making sure that you're able to get into the system and be able to interact with the documents would be the next piece of this. So it will, technically what should happen is you should get a automatic registration invite once you've completed those documents. So if for any reason you feel like you did not get that, you're not finding it in a spam box in your email after the meeting tonight, or when you have a chance the next week or so to kind of look through it. But that registration, it actually, what it would look like is it would give you, so you know if you had it or not, it would actually ask you like if you want to put a picture in there. It will ask you to if you'd like to change a background, anything like that. So it's just some really basic things. It also gives you the opportunity to do the training. There's a training module here, and so you can kind of go in there and do a little bit of walking around if you wanted to, beyond what I'm doing right now. So right now, I'm just going to show you, this is what your home screen would look like once you're registered in the system. Like I said, again, it would say, welcome supervisor. Up here, there's a little inbox, just like you might see for your regular Google Mail or something. You're going to see if there is something in there for you to do. So for example, this would be lit up and the student might have sent you something to complete. And so it's going to be lit up and it might say, student has submitted their clinical midterm evaluation assignment and needs you to review it. So they're going to click on you're just going to click on that, and that's going to open the document for you. So any documents that you have to complete, you're going to see a little number up here and a cue to click on it, and that will open up what you might need to do. And there's just going to be a list. So for example, these are some documents that says that this particular individual or user has to do. So this is a form that the student completes as an example. So anything that needs to be completed will be on the left-hand side, and there'll actually be a status over here. If it's been completed, it'll say completed. If it's waiting on your signature review, it'll say waiting on over here. If it's in progress and hasn't been completed, it'll say in progress. So it's going to give you updates. So if you think that you're done, you can definitely come back here. You can click on a document that's been queued to you. And it might say, it might tell you, gosh, this is in progress. If you ever have a question or a concern, the help button right up here is the best little device. They really are a really good support team at Tavera. So if you have questions or you're stuck, it is a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning with Tavera, but once you get the hang of it, it really, can be a lifesaver. So, but if you do have any kind of questions as you're going through and you're struggling with a process or something, you can click on that help desk, and they're pretty good about getting, put in a help ticket. Just like a lot of IT departments, you'll put in a little help ticket with your contact us. Put in some information there. If you can do if you ever do a screenshot, that sometimes can be helpful of an issue or an error that you're getting, you can upload that here as well. If, oftentimes, especially in the beginning, you might be tempted to contact the field liaison or myself. You certainly can do that, but I can tell you I'm not an expert. And just like your software programs, I'm not an expert, and I can't necessarily see your live screen and what might be going the problem. So I'm going to end up referring you to Tavera anyway. So there's going to end up probably being a delay. So honestly, the best way is if you're in the system, just click on that help button and ask a question. What can I show you? Back here is kind of the categories in terms of, this is the home screen. This is where you're going to find some tutorials. If you want to watch, once you get registered in there, you can watch some tutorials. Timesheets. So you're going to be queued to review student timesheets. And they're going to, this is more of a agenda style. Let's see if I can find a good one here. I may not find this. I don't often do this training. My one assistant, Liz, is out and she usually runs the training, so I'm not finding exactly what. But you will find that in here, you're going to get a cue to look at a student's timesheet. And it is going to list category by category what the student did for the week. It's going to be broken down in the number of hours. So we definitely want you to be able to, both the supervisors, if there are two, formalized, to both be able to look at that and review it. Because as you can imagine, if you're an MSW supervisor who's off-site, you don't necessarily know what your student might have been up to for the week. So it's a way to be informative to you. It's also a way for the task supervisor to make sure that what's in there is accurate, because they're spending the time with the student throughout the day. So, that you might be in, and it's not necessarily that the student might be inflating their hours or something, but sometimes we note that students aren't putting things in the right categories. And for the field liaison, that's a way for them to track what the student is doing. So it's really a nice communication tool. That's why we use the timesheet. It's not just about making sure that they meet those minimum hours at the end of the semester. We also are really important talk about self-care. And sometimes I find that students are doing way more hours than they need to be doing. And for most of our students, they're non-traditional, working with a family, may have full-time jobs that they're trying to navigate around, to make field work to the best, and to make sure that, definitely they know to be working with your schedule, but sometimes they're trying to do multiple things. And so we really want them to keep a good life balance. So when we say for the first year student, they're doing 13 to 15 hours a week, we really would like to have them stay within that framework. And so we can monitor that as well. And so if they're going 20, 30 hours a week in field, and we know that they're also trying to manage a full-time job and a family and all their coursework, that's a way for us to be able to go, what's happening that, you're putting in so many hours, you're going to burn out real quick, kind of thing. So that's a way for us to use those timesheets as well. Any assignments, so that's what this is. It looks like a little file folder. Any assignments that are, again, coming into you, you can also look over here. So for example, if you weren't necessarily seeing anything here, you could click on that file folder and see if there's any assignments for you. And again, they're not necessarily obviously assignments for you. They're really more things for you to look at, review, and interact with. So maybe the learning plan is going to come through here. So as you can see, there's the general learning plan. If you wanted to open that and interact with that, you can. You saw a button for making changes. You can do that. If you're ready to sign, you'll be able to sign that. But I'm going to leave this open for just a minute so you can kind of see what this template looks like. We're also going to be sending you the student handbook and field manual that has all of these documents in PDF form as well. So you can certainly look at any of these documents ahead of the schedule as well. And you'll also know all of our policies and procedures for field. But the student and you as supervisors, as well as the liaison, are able to interact with all of these documents. And this is the learning plan that I've been referencing. You can see here are the competencies listed. There's competency 1, demonstrate ethical and professional behavior. It's going to give you a description of what we're looking for in the competency and some particular or possible ways to articulate the tasks. So for example, for tasks related to competency 1, it'll tell you using self-reflection and self-regulation to examine personal assumptions, articulating clear identity as social professionals. We don't necessarily want you to utilize these exactly, but this is a way for you to kind of think about what that competency is really about and how to think about that more if you have any questions. It also is obviously a cue for the student to think about what this competency really is about and how to write that task. And as you can see, here's the tasks 1 and 2. So you want to again specifically and measurably put your tasks in here, 2 for each competency. The way that we hope that student will meet that competency and any additional notes. And that'll be repeated through the 9 competencies. Again, this is due at this week 2. Again, that's not your responsibility to know, but just to kind of give you an idea, that's the student's responsibility to make sure that it gets completed and turned in on time. And once you're complete, you've gone through all the competencies, down at the bottom, you're going to see that each person signs off. Again, see how important this is? We don't exclude anybody from these signature lines. So each person will have their own signature prompt. Again, once you register, your name will be in there. And so the student will actually see a little drop down, and they're going to send you that, they're going to find your name on their drop down list, and they're going to send you that document to sign. And once everybody has signed, it is official, and that's what you'll use. Obviously, that can be edited at midterm. There might be some revisions made, absolutely. But that's kind of an idea of what the learning plan looks like. And again, that's in this Tavera system. The final and the midterm look very similar. And actually the learning tasks are auto-populated into the midterm for you. So they'll actually take those tasks and they'll put them in the midterm automatically. So when you go to do the midterm, you're going to see that all you have to do is put what you've reviewed in terms of their task process, and how you can say that you've saw them, observed them doing those tests, and what score you want to give them. I'm trying to see if I can pull one up for you real quick. And again, you know, whether it's generalist or clinical, they're just going to be look different on the top. It's going to say midterm evaluation or final evaluation at the top. And as you can see, if this was an active student with some tasks from the midterm, they would be in here. And then you're just going to put in some discussion about the student progress toward the competency and some specific examples. And again, these can be done. You can start to work on this a little bit before your formal scheduled meeting with the field liaison, but this will all be discussed and scored during that formal meeting. Okay. As you can see, it's really just a framework. It moves over the same competencies over to midterm in a final format, and you're just then commenting on each of the tasks during those times. All right, so I see a couple chats come in. Is this the same site that we put our? Yes, it absolutely is. Tavera is the same system that you put your documentation in. Once you completed that documentation and I approved it, you should have received a link to finish the registration process. So again, if you don't recall getting that in your email, check your spam folder. We can definitely resend the link. And that would be something that you can definitely request from our office. So that could be something that you can request from Bonnie. Bonnie, can you just make sure you put in your email in the chat?
Absolutely.
And also, you know, you can definitely email me as well, and I can try to do that. But otherwise, I'll probably just refer you over to Bonnie to resend those links. So they can be set manually as well. But if you are able to check your email first for that link, it would be most appreciated. This gives you kind of a leg up, so you're not at the beginning of the semester trying to get yourself registered. Those links sometimes can expire too. So I know some of you who completed the paperwork a month or so ago, if you didn't get that registration done, it might have expired, and so we'll just happily, you know, send you a new link for that. All right. All right, any questions about some of these things? Again, they're going to be queued to you. You don't necessarily have to be going looking. That's really the easiest way to kind of learn Tavera sometimes, is once you've registered, the student's going to send you things for you to review. So you'll just be signing in. You can very much, what will happen if when you finish your registration, you can also actually link your Tavera inbox to your email. If you're not quite as tech savvy, you can also just go in there once or twice a week and just kind of check if there's anything in your inbox into there as well. Okay, so again, there'll be assignments that'll be queued to you. The timesheet will be sent to you. And this shouldn't be on this is more for students and where they're placed. So just so you know, like, so student A, if you did want to know, they actually have a particular link to you as the supervisor. So the whole system is intuitive now. Once you register, then it links you to your student and them to you. So you now have access to their documents in Tavera, and for you to be able to exchange information. Yeah, Caitlin, I know. Yeah, I actually did follow up with another email with Tavera. I'm not real sure. I know that the last 1 to 2 weeks, they've had some changeover in their support team. They're usually really good about getting back within like a day. And I'm aware. So we'll just keep plugging away with it. I can also, Bonnie, you can also email Bonnie. I think Bonnie should be able to actually just send you a link as well, a new link for Caitlin. Otherwise, you can email after the meeting as well. But I can tell you that I did email Tavera again this afternoon, ask them to follow up with you ASAP. So we'll just keep plugging away. I'm not as concerned about him finishing out and getting everything done, because we do have him registered. We just went ahead and registered him for his class because I don't want to delay from Tavera to be kind of part of that. Plus you're here, so I know you're committed to it. So okay. So those are kind of the highlights of Tavera right now. Is there any questions about anything we've talked about so far or Tavera? Now I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and kind of finish up here. Okay. We absolutely, want to just get into the schedule. Oops. Just want to make sure. Whoops. Second here. All right. Okay. Now you should be able to see it. So the schedule, I absolutely, if you want to take a screenshot of this one, this is an important one. So the student schedule, and for your schedule with the student, the start of the semester is Monday, August 30th, the end of semester 1, December 19. There is a break, a university break from December 21 through January 2nd. And then they restart their placement for semester 2 on January 3rd, going and ending the entire placement experience on April 24. We definitely encourage that students are not participating in their field placement during these breaks or any holiday that might be like a one-day holiday. For example, Labor Day will be in your day. So that is considered a university holiday. And so we ask that students aren't in field during those days. And that's really mostly for concern of liability and things like that. Also, again, we really want to make sure students are doing good self-care. Our students are going to school year round. So they don't take a break. They don't have large breaks. They have to take a formal leave of absence from the program for 1 semester or more if they want to take even a summer off. So most of our students are going to school year round. So we definitely want them to take their breaks. They're not real long breaks between each semester. So we just want to make sure our students are doing good self-care and really having those times with their family and to just kind of unwind and hopefully just take a break from school and from field. Oh, and I think I just answered the question for the start date. So there you go. All right. Okay. And we're actually at the point where we're at the field office contact part. This is my contact information. Again, you got Bonnie's in the chat, but there is it as well. Liz is sort of our secondary agency contact. She spends more time with students, but definitely can assist you with any agency questions that you have as well. And so that's really it. And then again, your field liaison is actually the person you might speak to the most. But if you have more of an administrative question or more policy or procedure question that you can certainly contact your field liaison. But if they're not able to answer, they'll come to us anyway. So and that's it. I have some resources for you that, if you're interested in learning more about some of the things that I talked about tonight, that's on our resource page. Marian Bogo is a big writer and researcher and educator in the field of field education. And so she has wrote quite a bit. So you can see that there. A link to Council on Social Work Education, a link to Code of Ethics of MSW, if you wanted to read more about Kolb's Learning, or Bertrand, Learning to Teach, Teaching to Learn, a guide for social work education. So obviously none of this is required, just if you're looking for some reading materials on having a student or enhancing your supervisory skills, or just kind of getting more information about what I talked about tonight. Otherwise, that ends our formal meeting, and you are free to go. If you would like to stay and put some things into the chat or stay for some live interaction questions, I'd be happy to stay as long as needed, and you're welcome to stay if you'd like to. Otherwise, we're going to call it a day. And I appreciate, thank you so much for coming this evening. I hope you took something away. I hope that your experience with our students is as possible and successful as possible. So thank you so much. I look forward to connecting with you all more in the next 8 months.